you. Thank you. My life can be divided into two parts, life before Lesbos and life after Lesbos. In my life before Lesbos, I was a full-time pop star in my country of the Netherlands. My time was spent traveling, touring, playing concerts, and my primary goal was to move as many people as I could with the power of song and music. In life after Lesbos, I can add a few new skills to my resume. Sea rescue, camp building, latrine digging, and the ability to cook a relatively decent meal for 1,500 people in a short amount of time. In the late summer of 2015, the world was rocked by a photograph of a little 4-year-old boy drowned on the coast of Turkey, trying to make his way to Europe. His name was Aylan Kurdi, and he became the face of a crisis that had only been in our periphery up until then. He became the face that I couldn't shake. I had to do something. On social media, I could see that there were actually refugees arriving in Amsterdam, where I'm from, and sleeping on the train station in benches. Without really giving it too much thought, I packed a bag, I got on a bicycle, like all Dutch people do, and made my way over to the train station. And there were other people on bicycles with bags who could not let that news go. Together, we started doing night shifts every night. We would bring food, blankets, toys, water, hugs, whatever you needed, we tried to provide. The first person I ever met who was considered a refugee was Hamid. Hamid lost his wife in the shelling in Syria and traveled with his 5 little girls across 8 countries to arrive at my doorstep in Amsterdam. He was tired, he was scared, he was nervous, he was grateful, and he was determined. And helping Hamid was the most natural thing I've ever done, and it became easy. The trains kept coming, and waves of families kept coming off of them, each one like Hamid. The elderly, wounded people with fresh wounds limping across the continent. And then children started arriving alone, without mothers and fathers. You have to imagine if you're in a war zone and you're quite poor and you've lost everything you've owned, and you have the opportunity to save one person, you save your child. And so the child is sent alone. Across the route, it is estimated that 10,000 children have gone missing. These children would arrive at the train station with the telephone numbers of their mothers sewn inside their jackets. And there was nothing more gratifying than being able to make one phone call to one mother and say that one child was safe. My world became consumed by their stories. I couldn't think of anything else. And every person told their story. They were generous about their story. It's how I learned about this little tiny island called Lesbos in Greece. It's about 14 kilometers off the Turkish coast, and it's the first step into Europe. In 2015, 500,000 people took the journey at the hands of human traffickers in tiny rubber dinghies and tried to reach Lesbos. The island was overwhelmed. I could see it on social media with only fishermen and locals and a handful of volunteers working. Little to no international aid at this point, and that shocked me. On social media, I could see that there were people like me going. And so I had a whiskey or 2 with a friend of mine, and I convinced him maybe we should go. We made a spontaneous decision to go for 10 days, and I stayed for 2.5 years. I want to tell you what it's like to have your boots on the ground in Lesbos. It's a 45-minute flight from Athens. It's a holiday island. And when you get off the tarmac, the flight attendant to this day still says, "Enjoy your stay." It's surreal. There are majestic mountains and olive trees and idyllic little fishing villages. And the week before I arrived, 28 human beings drowned in front of the village where I arrived, with only the little yayas and the fishermen and a few volunteers helping. Enjoy your stay. So when there's no plan and when there's no instructions and there's no one telling you to go this way or that way, You just try to do the next right thing. And for my friend and I on that first day on the island, it meant heading to the coast. You have to imagine every inch of this gorgeous island covered in life vests and broken boats. And you stand there and you light a fire and you become part of a human lighthouse. You have a flashlight that you've bought in your home country, and you turn it on and you sweep it across the water and it catches the reflection of a life vest. And the wind starts to carry the shouts. And suddenly there's a boat. And it becomes very real, and you don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I've never done this before. I just do the next right thing, and that means getting in the water up to my ankles. But the boat swerves, and suddenly I'm up to the water in my waist, and I have to hold the boat, and suddenly there you are, face to face. And it becomes very real, very fast. And the boats are coming over and over again, and you start to learn how to do this. Mothers throw their babies over the edge of the water into your hands. They don't know you. And over again, you're carrying people over the edge of the water, and there are people in hypothermia. There are people hyperventilating. There are people in shock, and in every single moment, we are just trying to do the next right thing. The roads from the coast to the camps were covered, and thousands of people were trying to find their way to the next step. It was winter, and there was driving rain, and only a few locals helping, and it was desperate. The official camps at the time were rudimentary at best. There were tarps covering families, really high fences, overcrowded, no water, no food, no heat, no sanitation. It was a prison. Actually, it might have been worse than a prison. The lack of information caused people to be tense and violent sometimes because they were in full survival mode. It was a barely managed chaos, and we had to do something to help. We started working alongside the locals that were already there. I must have made 3,000 sandwiches a day. I got pretty good at it. And I think we bought every single pair of socks on the island. We tried to fill the gaps, and this is how Movement on the Ground started. Me and 4 of my friends, who were all deeply affected by what we were seeing and what we weren't seeing in terms of a response, trying to activate the networks that we all have individually to get to work. We wanted to chip away at the chaos. So we started. We started small. We were naive, but it served us quite well. For example, we were thinking, music festivals. We've all been to them. Thousands of people are being led and ushered through all of their basic needs, safely and securely. If we can activate the music networks within our friend group, maybe we can learn a thing or two. There's no heat here. How do we get those big festival heaters? There's no light. How do we get the stage lights? There's no crowd control. How do we get those gates that we've all stood up against when we're listening to our favorite songs at concerts? There's no hot food for people coming out of the sea. Can you imagine, in November, with your babies, and you get a sandwich with 2 pieces of white bread and a piece of cheese? There's no hot food. Can we bring festival-style food trucks to the island? There's no communication between the people on the coast who are trying to save lives. How do we get mobile Wi-Fi to the most remote areas on this island? It was all very naive, but it worked. With the basic hardware and hot food in the bellies and lines forming in an orderly fashion, people started to feel calmer. And we could see that what we were doing was actually having an effect. We had little to no bureaucracy. We had pockets full of cash and a lot of blood, sweat, and tears and a big network. We kind of felt like the A-team without the van, just quick, fast, collaborate with whoever is there, and let's go. The work continued, and we never really stopped working. But in the second year of the humanitarian crisis, the entire landscape on Lesbos changed again. With the dawn of the EU-Turkey deal, this notorious deal, people could no longer keep moving into Europe or onto Athens and onto other countries. Now, the island was a holding area, and people were stuck. There was no going forward. There was no going back. The camps were filling up. They were at capacity, And we had to really change the way our care was presented. It wasn't an emergency situation. It was now very long-term. So we stood there and we asked ourselves, what is the next right thing? The municipality of Lesbos, after seeing our work, invited us to become partners in Karatepe. Karatepe is a space for about 1,300 people, and it's designated for the most vulnerable and for families. The most vulnerable meaning single-parent households, pregnant mothers, the injured, the elderly, the mentally ill, those who have been rescued from shipwrecks, people who deserve and need an extra level of care and protection. In the experience of the emergency prior, we had forgotten that the crowds were made up of individuals. They were the refugees, and we were the helpers. But here, in Karatepe, the individual became visible. With all of their hopes and dreams, all of their fears, all of their traumas, all of their stories, and time stretching out in front of them with no prospect of moving forward and moving backwards. Our core values were to reintroduce the human element and the heart into the care that we had seen missing. They would no longer be referred to as refugees. This was our first change. They were now guests, and they were now residents. Karatepe would not be referred to as a camp. It would be referred to as a village, as a community. During the emergency, we had seen the camps, and they were inhuman and basic, and this was not what we wanted. We wanted a community. The goal, we like to call it, is camp to campus. For 70 years, the humanitarian response has been the same. Create an area, slap some tents up, put up a fence, give them the basics, and wait and hope for something to change. How could we return dignity and solidarity and purpose and community into a response that we really felt was failing? So this is our dream for a concept called Camp to Campus. And we work on our dream daily. We want to create change from within a community, as well as to build a bridge from these new communities that are popping up around the world to the host communities that are often neglected and forgotten. So we got started. Together with the residents of the camps, of the village, we built solar energy. We created solar energy for the entire area so that each little house had a light, and so that the burden of the energy costs would no longer be the responsibility of Lesbos, a community already suffering economically. We vowed to spend the money that we raised from our donors locally, and therefore to create a bridge with vendors, shopkeepers, and farmers. We no longer allowed lines to happen. If something had to reach a guest in the community, it should be done face-to-face, house-to-house, person-to-person. And that's how we discovered the teachers and the farmers and the engineers and the musicians and the carpenters, because that's who refugees are. They're all of you with one name, refugee. Together with the Barsaf Foundation, we started a football program, and every single day the little boys and girls of Karatepe get on buses. They leave the village and they head out to local football pitches where local Greek coaches who are employed by our program work alongside young team leaders from within the community who are trained. The boys and girls are taught the basic core values of ambition and humility and respect and effort. So you've got boys and girls, different religions, different languages, all playing together with Greek kids. We built community kitchens in Karatepe, and this reintroduced choice to the guests and the residents of the village. They weren't standing in line anymore for food that we decided was good for them. Now they could cook for their families and for their neighbors. And what happens in a kitchen is you see what home used to look like. Cultures are exchanged. Stories are shared over pots and pans. My kitchen and your kitchen and their kitchen. Together with Because We Carry, another organization that we work so closely with, we built a community center. Within the community center, a myriad of activities happen, but once a week the village gets together for a dance party. It sounds trivial, but it is absolutely an energizing battery. You hear songs from all these countries, and at the end of every night, they end in a circle and they sing in Arabic and Kurdish and Greek and Dutch even, and English and French. And it creates community where community was lost. Karatepe is colorful, and it's peaceful, and it's loving. And we fight daily to keep a consistent level of care going against all the odds. Because we see that the environment affects the soul. Individuals become individuals and they flourish again. We believe in the power of this change. Despite all of this hard work, Lesbos is still in crisis, and the crisis is worse than it ever has been, and I never thought I would say that. The numbers are up, the media spotlight is gone, the camps are overflowing, and there is no more room for new people in Karatepe. So on the hills and the mountains and the villages around the island, tents are coming up again. We find ourselves pivoting yet again between providing emergency basic care and digging our heels in not to compromise an inch for the care we're already giving. The average time a refugee spends in a refugee camp around the world is 17 and a half years. I want that to sink in. There are 65 million refugees in the world. And the question I always get asked is, so what's the solution? Well, if I knew, we wouldn't have this problem. So what is the next right thing? I believe that transforming the environment has an immediate result and can actually change the narrative and possibly even the future of the people that we're serving. I want to reclaim community and kindness from the chaos of this world. I want to remember that the individual makes up the crowd, no matter how big the crowd. And I want to help restore dignity to people who have lost it, because dignity is the first step to healing, and there is a lot of healing that needs to be done. When you have lost everything that is you, and when you have lost your home and all the things that identify who you are, when you have so much pain and so much trauma, then there is nothing more human than to expect to land in a place that is safe, loving, and lifting. And so we move towards these goals in small but determined steps, led by the heart and powered by the idea of individuals helping individuals. And that, to me, is the next right thing. Thank you.